Dr. Travis, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Really excited to talk to you because you've got quite the fascinating background from the United States to Ecuador to being a school leader and superintendent and head of school for 15 years. You've got a young child. You're about to move to a new school in New York. Just really excited to jump into the topic of the day and specifically around your book, which is rooted in trust. So why don't we start there and tell us what's going on in this day and age in this world with trust.
Well, thanks, Tom, and I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation as well. Well, if you look at a whole variety of resources that monitor and study and assess trust levels, there's a barometer that's published internationally, which a few years ago now was talking about how there is a trust crisis in the world, and in almost every, well, in fact, in every industry and sector, trust levels continue to fall year after year after year. So that's the bad news. The good news is, though, and if I boil down my doctoral work and what I talk about in the book, Trust Ed, the Bridge to School Improvement, is it really comes down to this one major finding, and it goes like this. The number one indicator of school success is trusted leadership. And what's really interesting about that that finding, Tom, is it doesn't seem to matter how we define the term success, because you can talk about school being assessed for success in many different ways. But if we're talking about, say, student achievement levels, when we look at the schools where we see the highest levels of student achievement, we also find the highest levels of trusted leadership. When you look at teacher retention rates, when they are at their highest, it's in schools that have the highest levels of trusted leadership. When you look in measurements like discretionary energy, that's usually looking at like volunteerism of community and staff, what you find is they'll have the highest levels of volunteerism, community support, when there are high levels of trusted leadership. In the private school sector, financially, those schools that are doing well with their donor development programs and just the bottom line, well, again, it's a direct line to the trust level of leadership. So then it begs the question, or questions, how do you assess it? How do you intentionally develop it? How do you protect it? And that's really what I talk about in the book.
That's fantastic. It makes sense, right? It's so foundational that it gives rise to all the other positive attributes and values and virtues. So what does trust make possible?
You and I were talking before we hit record. It's like magic, and it really is. And I've seen this in my own experience, and I've observed it in so many others. When we get this element of trust right, meaning there is a healthy and positive relationship between leadership and the staff, all kinds of good things just start happening. And it's because people feel safe to fail. Frankly, it's like, no, I'm going to try this. And what do you think? Should we try that? And it's like, yes, go. When people work in an environment like that, they're motivated to dive in deeper, to try something fresh. And so, again, when we get the trust issue or factor in a healthy place, many good things happen, but the opposite is also sadly true. And this is what so many school leaders and school improvement people really miss. If we don't take time to address this issue first, nothing else is going to improve long term. You might see a few blips of improvement in math initiatives or language arts. It's not going to be sustainable if that trust element is not in place first. Let me share this one stat, Tom, and it's a really fascinating stat because it applies across industries. So it doesn't matter who's listening, whether they're educators or not today. 70% of school initiatives fail. 70% of new startup businesses fail. 70% of corporate improvement initiatives fail. The majority of improvement work that's being done in the public sector and in the private sector, in the education sector, It doesn't work. And so then when you drill and look at the 30%, okay, what's going right? The failures are almost always tied to some level of failure of execution, right? So what is it about the execution that was failed? They did not take the time to ensure positive and healthy relationships were in place between leadership and those doing the work. And it's just a classic, and you and I, we've been in schools, we see it all the time. If you have a school administrator who's saying, okay, we're adopting this new form of assessment, or we're adopting this new literacy practice, but they don't actually understand it and they don't actually own it, everybody's gonna like, oh yeah, here's the latest thing, here's another one, right? And so again, if we really want to be in that 30% where we're actually seeing real, positive, effective, authentic improvement and change to what we're doing, leadership's got to own it. They got to believe in it. They got to be experts in it. And they've got to be positive in their relationship with those that are working in a like-mindedness and a like-minded direction. Jim Collins, we use this illustration, we're all on the same bus and we're all going the same direction. Really critical. And if we don't get that right, we're really going to be frustrated.
Yeah. I mean, it's the essence of exceptional cultures. We're writing a book right now called The Great Engagement, and the subtitle is how CEOs and superintendents create exceptional cultures. And it really is built on this foundation of trust, because when you can create that trust, then people feel empowered.
Right.
They aspire to something. They feel inspired, but it's their own. So it's their own aspiration that they're excited about. And when you can combine that, it really does create that magic. In our case, we engage the clients for 5 months, and typically, and I joked with my business partner when I started working with them that it took me about 5 years as a school superintendent to create that same feeling, and I could have done it with five months with his help. How do you make it happen quickly?
You don't. No. In fact, the studies have shown us, Tom, it takes about 7 months to build foundational trust between a leader and those to whom they're leading. Now, most people will extend to you a courtesy trust, but it's not really a true, oh no, I trust this guy, I trust this gal. It does take time. One of the secrets, if you will, is healthy trust and healthy improvement takes time, and you've got to be okay with that. Trust is built over time and consistency. When I'm coaching others and even coaching myself, one of the principles that I use, especially I think about, like I will have a school leader will call me and explain whatever crisis they've gone through and whatever has broken trust, and this is usually why they call me. And so, well, what do I do to repair it? And it's actually relatively simple. It's make a promise, keep it. Make a promise, keep it. And so our work together will be basically, what promises can you make and fulfill in the next few weeks, and no more than out the next semester. And so that's the kind of coaching planning that we work on, is what promises can we make and actually deliver on, because this is how trust is built. Make a promise, keep it. Make a promise, keep it. Now, I think, like in Covey's work, the speed of trusting, the more that happens consistently, yes, then it does get faster. But especially if there's been a level that's been broken in the past, no, it's going to take some time. This is not, we're going to turn this around in a month or 3 months. No, this can take years to fix. But typically, you can see improvement, within a year, and then you can really measure improvement within a year and a half, and statistically be able to even assess, no, we're getting to a better place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you brought up Covey's book, Speed of Trust. It's a great one, because to me, it really helped, because we think of trust as like this one monolithic thing, either I trust or I don't.
Right.
And he breaks it into those 4 different components. And so it really helps you to diagnose, okay, which one of these is missing? Do I not trust the person's sort of core level integrity, or do I not trust their intent? Do I not trust their capabilities, or are they just not producing results? Are they not able to to keep promises, like you said. So that's Covey's approach on trust. What's yours? How would you define trust in the first place? And then how do you go about, and I love this idea of promise, and then make a promise and keep it. What other ideas do you have to share with the audience?
Well, in the book, I use an analogy of a suspension bridge. So, trust is, and trusted leadership is really when all the elements of the bridge are in place, and to the extent that you can trust, each element of that. And what we know with a trusted bridge structure is they've all got to be in place, or you're not going to drive out or walk over that bridge. But once trusted leadership is in place, then it is the path, if you will, the route to get people from where they are to where they desire to be. So, what is the function of trust? It's movement. It's getting us from where we are, and that river that's running underneath that might be all the potential conflicts of whatever it is you're facing, all the potential impediments to change, and trusted bridge is this idea of you're giving a means by which people can get across those obstacles to get where they want to be, and it's clear where they're going. I mean, you think about it, you get on a bridge. No, your lane should be pretty clear, right? So one of the things I talk about is trusted leaders. They are clear, they're organized. There's clear markings and benchmarks. We know where we're going. The vision is clear. So when we look at very specific things of what that looks like, in my work we've identified, especially talking about school leadership, but it is universal, that there are 6 components. The foundation of that bridge is beliefs, values. The substructure is really all about supporting and connecting everything to what we believe, so to the foundation. The bearings, those are the moving parts of a bridge. Well, in leadership here, what we're talking about is the ability to be flexible, but to be flexible, we've got to be involved. So trusted leadership isn't distant. It's you're involved in the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, and you're flexible. The girders of the bridge, those cross beams, this is all about contextualization. This is all about the ability to adapt. You're probably familiar with the quote, best practice must always be contextualized. One of the things that I've seen with schools, especially think about the large districts who are really well-intended in what they're trying to accomplish, but when they make a decision for the entire district of schools from the top down, it's really it's a well-intentioned error, because what we've learned is every campus is unique. Every campus is unique. And so you have to contextualize whatever it is you're trying to do to that unique campus. And this is true in public, private sector, charter sector. Every one of these campuses is unique. So we have to have the skill set of adapting, contextualizing to this unique faculty, this unique community, this unique facility, these unique resources. And that's so important to levels of trust, is really understanding who we serve and who we're working with and where we are. Just like a bridge is going to be different based on how wide is that river, is this bridge being built on a curve, et cetera. Superstructure of the bridge is all about culture. What's the big thing that you see at a distance on a bridge? It's the superstructure. Well, in leadership, the superstructure is all about intentional, positive, and healthy culture and relationships. And then the deck of the bridge, which is kind of where I started, that part that we drive over, it looks simple, but engineers will tell you actually it's quite difficult. There's quite a lot of work goes into the materials of a deck, and the porosity of the material to deal with the weather and all the things. Doesn't create a whole bunch of potholes, but for the user it should appear really simple. It's flat, it's smooth, this is my lane, and this is where we're going. There you go. Those are the 6 major components of trusted school leadership. And then I use the analogy of the suspension cables as just all the best practices that have been identified. And here we're sitting on the shoulders of others who have gone before us, who have done tremendous work in looking at school leadership research. I'm thinking of like Bob Marzano and his team. They have identified, years ago, and then it's been reaffirmed in several major follow-up studies. We specifically know 21 behaviors of school leaders that is directly tied to student achievement levels. And so we can drill in and look at, okay, and then the work that I got involved in my research and study was, okay, what of those 21 practices enhance and support levels of trust? And so we do have a way to get right in, look at the nitty gritty and say, well, if this isn't happening, but this is also what we can specifically change and implement, contextualized to your school setting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And we could spend another 2 hours on unpacking all those 6. And the challenge with the 21 behaviors and sort of the knowing versus doing gap that is significant. We, especially in education world, we get this stuff intellectually. It's hard to bring to life. So I'm curious, of the 6, what do you find most often is missing?
Wow. So where we see trust really breaking down most frequently is between the foundation and the substructure, meaning the schools or school leaders are saying they believe or have these values about learning or about the school or about students or the role of the teacher. But then the substructure, meaning they're not connecting and supporting what they say they believe to what they're actually doing. And, so again, the classic is, we say we believe that teachers are the #1 factor in student engagement and student success levels. But then in how we operate the school, if we're not constantly saying to ourselves, how does this impact the teacher? How does this positively support the teacher? If we're not constantly processing every decision through that question, then we're not really practicing and living out what we say we believe. What we often forget is the teachers are the school. It's not the building, it's not the curriculum, it's not the resources. The school is the teachers. That's the human resource is, if you will, the product. If we use a corporate mindset, and no, what's our business? Our business is teachers, and therefore they must be valued at the highest level. And when we look at the international and even national examples of where schools are thriving, you see this lived out, where teachers are highly valued, highly supported. Decisions of operations of the school are made around what is best for teachers. Some have criticized me, Tom, in saying, well, you're not very student-centered. Oh, yes, I am when we're talking about what does instruction look like. What do the curricular options need to look like for our kids today? No, that's all going to be student-centered. We have to be thinking through, what does this look like in what we're delivering for students to succeed? But when we're talking about the organization of the school, the operation of the school, now, #1 question always has to be, how does this benefit teachers? Because when teachers are well supported, they thrive and get engaged. And when they thrive and get engaged, we know that has a direct correlation to student engagement levels. So you want high levels of student engagement, you got to start with teacher levels of engagement first. And that's why, my premise is you build school improvement through the development of school leadership. Because when you've got positive leaders who are supporting their teachers and that reciprocal trusted relationship is going on, again, wonderful things start happening with students. And there's a direct correlation.
Well, it makes sense too, right? If the teacher's job primarily is to grow students, to help them improve, help them to learn new things, new possibilities, grow in confidence, encourage, then if we want the teachers to do that for the students, then as leaders of schools, we need to do that for the teachers. We need to be the ones that are growing their capabilities. We always say that there is no such thing as the organization. There is no such thing as the school district. It's just a name, a legal name that we slap on a bunch of people.
Yeah.
That if you want to grow and improve an organization, there's no organization to grow and improve. You have to grow and improve the people, including yourself first and foremost as the superintendent or as the headmaster or as the CEO, starting with yourself, lead by example, right? So what advice do you have for, aspiring school superintendents out there that maybe are a school teacher right now, or maybe doing a different administrative job? Where should they be focusing their energy and effort?
Well, I actually will springboard off of your previous comment about developing teachers. I actually a large proponent of no. Our job as leaders is to create an environment for that to happen. Just the same way I would train a teacher to say the most effective level of teaching is guided self-discovery by the student. Right now, there is a place for direct instruction too. I don't totally throw that out, but what we know is where we see the highest levels of learning for students, it's when they discover the learning themselves. So in the same way, when I'm working with faculty and staff, it's okay, am I creating an environment, an opportunity for them to discover and develop? And that actually starts really in the HR process. Are you hiring the right people? But then are you providing a vehicle? Because in the end, you really can't change anyone, right? All change has to happen internally. And so what you can do as a leader is, okay, how do I work to create an environment in which people, they feel trusted, they feel free and able to pursue their passions and develop. And if you have an individual that just isn't where they want to be, well, that's another conversation. The aspiring leader, I would focus first on a lot of self-reflection. There's a number of assessment tools. We've developed one through a company called School and I can share that link with you. There's actually a free self-assessment that you can do and look, okay, where do I see myself in relation to these 6 components of trusted school leadership? But there's other tools. I know Collins has got a tool, Horsager, the Trusted Leadership Group out of Minneapolis. I think they have a self-assessment tool. I would start by just pull out the mirror and speak to others, and hopefully you got some good friends who will speak truth and make sure you know yourself. One of the sections of the book, I talk about just this real critical element of being able to be self-reflective. Mindfulness gets a lot of conversations today, right? That's a kind of a hot topic. But in that sense of mindfulness means I'm aware of myself, both my weaknesses and my strengths. This is a healthy place to start. One of the really difficult things that I have to sometimes navigate is I'll have say a school board member will call me and say, hey, we want you to do a trust assessment with our staff and with our superintendent, our principals. And I'll say, well, do they want it? Uh-huh. Because if they don't want it, there's no point in us doing this, right? There has to be this self-awareness that, we've got an issue. If they don't recognize there's an issue, there's not really any way I can help them. You know what I'm saying, Tom? It's like we got to start with self-reflection, self-awareness, recognize our needs. We all need to grow in some way and own it. That no, we're not perfect beings. We all have problems and shortcomings.
Yeah, couldn't agree more that coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. And,
yes, right.
Now the question is that the trick is, how do you get them to ask for it? That's a different question. And that is a measure of effective leadership, in my opinion, because we've got to be able to help people, whether it's through leadership and inspiration, through more effective management and having high bars that we're setting and that we're all agreeing to, or whether it's through some form of coaching. How do we get people to see that it's needed? Because that's a measure of effective leadership for that school board member. That's their first job, right? Is to get the team to see that this might be helpful to you and see if they can get that breakthrough.
Yeah. And when they do, though, then it all changes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good. It's like I do a lot of relating back to the classroom, maybe because I came out of the classroom. I see so much about good instruction that has a direct tie to good management or good school leadership. When students understand the why of the learning, they get engaged. And think about Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. It's a business classic now, but it really applies well for what we do with schools or even teachers in the classroom. When kids understand the why, often we talk about, authentic literacy is all about tying the learning and the knowledge to what matters to the student. It becomes authentic. And when they get it, ooh, you can't stop them from learning, right? Then it's like, no, they're learning machines because they get it and they find their own motivation. Again, you can't change others, but what you can change is the environment and the opportunities and position what the hoped growth is all about. And when there's a compelling why, now it makes a huge difference, but you got to get there first.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. You're taking me back to my days of teaching economics, and I'll never forget. There was one student in particular who couldn't understand why I was giving him so much feedback, and I think he finally got that because I cared about him, right? Because I wanted him to take more time and to slow down and to write more coherently, because he was going to college in a couple of years and he needed to up his game. And once he started to see, oh, okay, that's why he's doing this. He's not being critical. He's just trying to be helpful. He started to get that why. I'm sure I could have done it more effectively. I was young and learning myself at the time, but it's how we all learn, right? Is through the good and the good stuff and the mistakes. Well, let's wrap up with. I know your book. Obviously, you'd recommend, and we'll put a link to that down below. And I know that Forbes picked up, I think, a few of your articles, and so we'll try to include those as well for folks that are interested. But what other book would you recommend to people out there that you think is worth reading?
Well, there's just so many. The Trust Edge by David Horsager, that was a bestseller on the Wall Street Journal probably 10 years ago now, but it's still a great read. Again, it was written for the business sector, but I'm a big fan of David, and there's a lot that I believe that as school leaders we can glean from his work. He breaks trust down into 8 pillars, but really great examples in there and some real great takeaways. He developed something called the 90-day quick plan. And again, that really aligns well with what I've seen is when we do, make a promise, keep it philosophy of what can we see, continuous small elements of growth. Really, we'll get you there. But Horsager's book is still a great read. Jim Collins, Good to Great, classic. But every business and school leader, I think, needs to benefit from his work. I mentioned Marzano. Bob Marzano, his team have come up with just some wonderful materials and research to support what does quality education look like to prepare kids for their future, not our past, is a phrase I like to use a lot because so much is changing so rapidly. We have, when people look at education as, maybe there's an element of truth to this, obviously, that, that education is all about preparing students for their economic future. Yeah, that's a part of what we do. But we have no clue what the employment scheme is going to look like, even probably in 5 years, let alone 10 years, right? I mean, we have jobs and industries today that none of us conceived of even just a few short years ago. So it becomes all the more important to look at the key and important dispositions and characteristics that we should be developing in students, and not worry so much about the content. Tony Wagner, there's another, Most Likely to Succeed. What a great book. And you got it right there. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Tony's, and would also encourage aspiring leaders. Now you need to be reading, listening. Tony Wagner, Sir Ken Richardson, of course, the late Sir Ken. You got to be listening to, his classic TED Talks are still relevant for what we're working on today, still true, if not even more true than ever before. And then I guess the other thing is make sure you are being mentored and that you are mentoring others. one of the real keys to leadership success is that you're always pouring into somebody else, because we know as the teacher, you always benefit more from those whom you're teaching, and also just continue to be mentored. And if you don't have a mentor, find one, seek one out, and keep that going. And here I'm sort of years old, and still seek mentorship and being mentored by others. It's all about working in relationship and gleaning from those relationships in ways that we can serve others.
Yeah, especially in education, right? If we want to be the ultimate models of learning, we have to be continuously learning ourselves.
Continuously. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Doctor. It's been great talking to you, and have a blessed rest of your week.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.